During my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law's family insulted me by calling me a freeloading old woman. His dad angrily said, "Sit in the corner and don't ruin our son's wedding." But his mom crossed the line by throwing red paint on my dress. I calmly made a call, and a few minutes later, the entire staff walked out. I ran my hands down the smooth fabric of my simple blue dress, taking a deep breath as I stepped into the Grand Plaza Hotel. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of excitement and nerve surging through me. Today was my daughter Amy's wedding day, a day that should have been filled with nothing but joy. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile. The grandeur of the lobby was almost overwhelming. The floors gleamed with polished marble, the chandeliers sparkled like a cascade of diamonds, and the soft murmur of elegantly dressed guests filled the air. It was exactly the kind of place that Stephen's family would choose for an event like this: extravagant, luxurious, and a stark contrast to the simple life Amy and I had always known. "Mom." I turned at the sound of my daughter's voice, my smile widening instinctively. Amy rushed toward me, still in her regular clothes, looking slightly out of place amid the opulence surrounding her. Relief flickered in her eyes, but there was something else too. Something I recognized all too well. Anxiety. Unease. I had seen that look in her eyes before. "You made it," she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Of course, sweetheart." I reached out to hug her, but she hesitated, her eyes flickering around the room before she took a small step back. My heart clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Amy said, her fingers twisting together. Her hesitation only deepened the sinking feeling in my stomach. "What is it?" I asked gently. She exhaled, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Stephen's family, they've made some changes to the seating arrangements." A chill ran down my spine. I had been bracing myself for something like this ever since Natalie Tyler, Stephen's mother, had taken control of the wedding planning. "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I already had a sinking suspicion. Amy bit her lip, avoiding my gaze. "They moved you to the back table," she said quickly, the words tumbling out. Near the kitchen entrance, I felt as though the ground beneath me shifted. "The kitchen?" I repeated, my voice steady despite the tight knot forming in my chest. Natalie said it's because of the photographer setup, but Amy trailed off, still unable to look me in the eye. Before I could respond, a sharp, familiar voice cut through our conversation. "Amy, what are you doing down here? You need to be in the bridal suite immediately." Natalie Tyler strode across the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor with practiced precision. She exuded power and privilege, her expensive designer dress fitting her frame perfectly. Her sharp eyes flicked toward me, scanning me with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, you're here," she said coolly. I straightened my spine, refusing to let her intimidate me. "Hello, Natalie. The hotel looks beautiful." Her lips curled into a tight, cold smile. "Yes. Well, we wanted everything to be perfect for Stephen and Amy." Then, without missing a beat, she turned to my daughter. "Darling, your hair appointment was scheduled 10 minutes ago. We can't keep everyone waiting." Amy hesitated, her eyes darting toward me. "Mom, I'm so sorry about." "Go on," I said gently, offering a reassuring smile. "It's your special day. Don't worry about me." She nodded hesitantly before hurrying off, leaving me alone with Natalie. The moment Amy was out of earshot, Natalie's polite facade dropped. "Listen," she said, her voice lowering to a sharp whisper. "I know Amy insisted on inviting you, but let's be honest, you don't belong here." I refused to flinch. "I'm here for my daughter." "Yes," she said with a smirk, "and you can support her from the back of the room. The Tylers have a reputation to maintain. We don't need your modest circumstances ruining the wedding photos." A cold wave of anger settled in my chest. "Oh, and one more thing," Natalie added with a sickly sweet smile. "We've arranged for the staff meals to be served at your table." It seemed appropriate. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling the full weight of her humiliation. I took a steadying breath, pushing down the lump forming in my throat. I thought about all the years I had spent working extra shifts as a nurse to support Amy, about the nights I had stayed up helping her study for medical school entrance exams, and the sacrifices I had made to ensure she had a bright future. Now, she was marrying into one of the wealthiest families in the state, and suddenly, all my hard work seemed invisible to them. Shaking off the bitter sting, I made my way toward the ballroom. The space was breathtaking. Chandeliers cast a golden glow across the room, fresh floral arrangements covered every table, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. But as I approached the back, my stomach twisted. My table was tucked behind a massive pillar, almost entirely hidden from view. Worse, it was right next to the kitchen doors where servers bustled in and out. The message was clear. I was an afterthought. "Mrs. Carter's?" I turned to see a young woman in a hotel uniform approaching me hesitantly. "I'm Teresa from Event Services." I just wanted to confirm that you'd be sitting here. I nodded. That's right. Teresa hesitated, lowering her voice. I just wanted you to know we all know who you are. I blinked in surprise. Excuse me, my sister was at County General last year, Teresa explained, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. She was in that massive pileup on the highway. You stayed on shift for over 30 hours to help. You saved her life. Memories of that night flooded back, a chaotic emergency room, the exhaustion that clung to my bones, and the determination that had kept me going despite it all. We think it's wrong how they're treating you, Teresa continued. And, I wanted to let you know that if you need anything, just ask. The whole staff is on your side. For a moment, I stood there, processing her words. Then, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let Natalie Tyler humiliate me without a fight. A small smile tugged at my lips as an idea formed. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse for my phone, there is something you can help me with? As I dialed a familiar number, I let my gaze drift across the ballroom. The Tyler family moved through the space like royalty, dictating orders, making adjustments. And at the center of it all was Natalie, gesturing dramatically at some perceived imperfection in the table settings. She thought she had won, but she had no idea what was coming next. I took a steady breath before pressing the call button on my phone. Hello, Ethan. It's Laura Carter. Remember that favor you owe me? I think it's time to call it in. The next 2 hours flew by in a blur of activity. From my corner near the kitchen entrance, I watched as the ballroom filled with guests, each dressed in the most extravagant designer attire, their jewelry sparkling under the chandeliers. The Tyler family, in particular, seemed to delight in greeting their guests with elaborate embraces and air kisses, their wealth and influence on full display. But when their eyes landed on me, their warm smiles faltered, their gazes narrowing ever so slightly. Is that hers? I overheard a woman whisper to Natalie. The nurse? Natalie's voice was just loud enough to carry across the space. Yes, unfortunately. But don't worry, we've kept her out of sight. Can't have anything spoiling Steven's big day. I checked my watch. Any moment now. The first sign of trouble came when Teresa and 3 other servers, in perfect synchronization, stripped off their uniforms, revealing street clothes underneath. They walked with deliberate steps through the ballroom, heading straight for the exit. Where are you going? Natalie's voice cut through the chatter, sharp with irritation. We haven't even served the appetizers. Teresa turned, her posture confident. We quit. Before Natalie could respond, more staff followed suit. The bartenders packed up their tools. The valet attendants abandoned their posts. Even the wedding coordinator closed her laptop, tucked it under her arm, and walked out the door. Natalie's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. What is the meaning of this? You can't just leave. We have a contract. Actually, a deep voice interrupted from the doorway. They can. Every head turned toward the entrance as Ethan Chen, the CEO of the Grand Plaza hotel chain, stepped into the room. His presence alone commanded attention, and I watched as Natalie's anger twisted into confusion, then into a hasty attempt at charm. Mr. Chen. She hurried forward, forcing a smile. There must be some mistake. We booked this venue months ago. Surely we can resolve. Ethan held up a hand, cutting her off. You booked the venue, yes. But, now, the Grand Plaza will no longer be hosting this event. Effective immediately. All staff operations are ceasing. The room erupted into chaos. Guests murmured. Steven's father began shouting about lawyers, and Amy, my sweet Amy, looked as though she might faint. Mom. Amy pushed through the stunned crowd, coming to my side. What's happening? Before I could respond, Ethan turned toward me, his expression warming. Laura, there you are. Natalie's head snapped toward me, her eyes filled with something that almost resembled fear. You know each other? Ethan let out a soft chuckle. Know each other? Laura Carter saved my daughter's life last year. She spotted a rare condition that every other doctor had missed. She stayed with my little girl through the night, monitoring her personally. I saw the realization dawning on Natalie's face, her carefully constructed world starting to crack at the seams. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, confusion mixing with intrigue. And more than that, Ethan continued, his voice carrying through the now silent room, Laura Carter sits on the board of directors for our hospital group's charitable foundation. She has been instrumental in directing millions in funding to underprivileged communities. When she called me earlier today and told me how she was being treated at her own daughter's wedding, well, let's just say that the Grand Plaza does not associate with that kind of behavior. Amy's wide eyes filled with tears as she turned to me. Mom, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever say anything? I squeezed her hand gently, because I wanted you to make your own way, sweetheart. I never wanted my connections to influence your choices. I paused, scanning the stunned faces in the room. But I also won't let anyone treat us like we're beneath them. This is ridiculous. Natalie shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "You can't just shut down our wedding. Do you know how much we spent?" I exhaled slowly, then smiled. "Oh, I'm not shutting it down." I nodded to Ethan, who in turn gestured toward the staff waiting by the doors. A new team entered, wheeling in fresh serving carts, crisp white linens, and perfectly arranged centerpieces. "I'm taking over." Natalie's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I turned my attention to Amy and Stephen. "The wedding will go on, if you both still want it to." But, under new management, and with new seating arrangements, Stephen, who had been watching everything unfold in stunned silence, finally stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry. I had no idea my parents were treating you this way." He turned to Amy, shame evident in his eyes. "And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you and your mom sooner." Amy looked between him and me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm sorry too. I should have spoken up." I took both their hands in mine, giving them a reassuring squeeze. "No more apologies." I stood at the center of the ballroom, taking in a remarkable transformation around me. What had begun as a day filled with humiliation had turned into something truly beautiful. I cleared my throat, calling for the guests' attention. "This is still your day, Amy and Stephen," I said, my voice steady and firm. "Let's make it a good one." The room fell silent as I turned to the gathered guests. "Anyone who wants to stay and celebrate Amy and Stephen's wedding is more than welcome. But let's be clear, this is a space where everyone is equal. Everyone is family." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, but the energy had changed. The Tyler family, now thoroughly humbled, retreated into quiet corners. Their usual air of superiority had been stripped away. Meanwhile, the rest of the guests, freed from the weight of judgment and social pretense, began to relax. And Amy, my beautiful, radiant daughter, was glowing with pride as she looked at me. Though slightly delayed, the ceremony commenced with a sincerity it might not have had otherwise. I took my seat in the front row, a place that should have been mine from the start. As I settled in, I caught Teresa's eye. She had changed back into her uniform along with the other staff who had initially walked out. She winked at me, and I smiled in return. I had expected this day to be one of silent endurance, of swallowing pain for the sake of my daughter's happiness. But instead, it had become a moment of strength and quiet victory. Sometimes, the best revenge wasn't about getting even, it was about standing tall, proving your worth without needing to say a word. Yet, the surprises weren't over. As the reception began, the atmosphere in the ballroom was unrecognizable from the rigid, cold affair it had started as. The string quartet played softly in the background, and guests mingled freely. The hierarchy that had dictated social interactions earlier in the day had crumbled in the wake of the afternoon's revelations. I glanced toward the back of the room, where Natalie Tyler now sat, at the very table she had assigned to me near the kitchen doors. Her husband, Richard, kept checking his phone, no doubt scrambling to assess the social damage of the day's events. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Mrs. Carter's?" I turned to find Stephen standing beside my table, looking nervous, but determined. "Could we talk privately for a moment?" he asked. I nodded, following my new son-in-law to a quiet corner of the ballroom. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I just wanted you to know," he began, "that I've made some decisions. I'm stepping away from my family's hospital administration position." My eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Stephen, that's not necessary." "It is," he insisted. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. I went into healthcare administration because it was expected of me." But he straightened his shoulders, a new resolve in his eyes. "I want to go to medical school. Like Amy. I want to help people directly. The way you do." Warmth spread through my chest, a smile tugging at my lips. "Amy never told me you felt that way." "I never told her," Stephen admitted. "I was afraid of disappointing my parents. But after seeing you today, how you handled everything with such grace and strength, I realized I've been trying to please the wrong people." Before I could respond, Ethan Chen appeared beside me. "Laura," he said, a knowing look in his eyes. "There's someone here who'd like to speak with you." He gestured toward the ballroom entrance, where an elegant older woman stood waiting. My breath caught in my throat. "Dr. Jean Reynolds, the current health commissioner of the state." She approached with a warm smile. "Laura Carter," she said. "I'm so glad I could make it, even if I am fashionably late." I barely had time to process before Natalie and Richard Tyler, who had been watching from their table, nearly tripped over themselves rushing over. "Commissioner Reynolds," Natalie gushed. "What an unexpected honor, Doctor." Reynolds cut her off with a cool glance. "Save it, Natalie. I'm here to speak with Laura." She turned back to me, her smile returning. "Laura, the board meeting is next week, and I wanted to discuss this with you in person. We've reviewed your proposal for the new community health initiative, and not only are we approving it, we're doubling the funding." A stunned silence fell over the ballroom. I caught the incredulous expressions on Natalie and Richard's faces, their jaws practically unhinged. But more than that, Doctor, Reynolds continued, I'm retiring next year. And, the governor has been asking for recommendations for my replacement. She gave me a meaningful look. I'd like to put your name forward if you're interested. The murmurs of the guests grew louder, the weight of her words settling over the room. I felt Amy's hand slip into mine, and only then did I realize she had approached during the conversation. Mom, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You never told me about any of this. I squeezed her hand gently. I've always believed that our work should speak for itself. All those nights when you thought I was just working extra shifts, I was also building relationships, creating programs, and finding ways to help more people. I never needed recognition. I just wanted to make a difference. Doctor. Reynolds nodded approvingly. And that, she said firmly, is exactly why you're perfect for the position. Natalie's face had gone pale. She looked like she might faint. But she's just a nurse, Natalie stammered. Doctor. Reynolds arched a perfectly shaped brow. Just a nurse, she repeated, her voice sharp with incredulity. Laura Carter has done more for healthcare in this state than your entire family's hospital network. While you were planning galas and worrying about social status, she was actually saving lives and changing the system from within. Stephen stepped forward, his voice steady. Commissioner Reynolds, I'd actually love to hear more about the Community Health Initiative. I looked at my daughter, my new son-in-law, and the people around me who had finally seen the truth. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a turning point. Stephen took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. I'm planning to apply to medical school. Natalie's reaction was immediate. Medical school? She repeated, her voice shrill. But you're supposed to take over the family business. No, Mother, Stephen said firmly. I'm going to make my own way. Just like Amy did. Just like Mrs. Carter taught her to do. The reception continued into the evening, but the tone had shifted dramatically. The Tylers, their social standing shaken, remained at their table, speaking in hushed voices. Meanwhile, I found myself surrounded by guests eager to discuss my work, my ideas, and the future of healthcare in our state. As I watched Amy and Stephen share their first dance, my heart swelled with pride. This day had turned out so differently from what I had feared. I hadn't set out to humiliate the Tylers or prove my worth. I had simply refused to be diminished by their prejudice. Teresa appeared at my side with a glass of champagne. You know, she said with a grin, when my sister told me about the nurse who saved her life, she said you were some kind of angel. But after today, I think you might actually be a ninja. I laughed, accepting the glass. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about standing tall and letting their actions speak for themselves. Later that night, as the reception was winding down, Amy found me alone on the hotel's terrace, gazing out at the city lights. Mom, she said softly, I'm so sorry about everything. Not just today, but I've been pulling away from you, trying to fit into Stephen's world. I forgot who I am, who you taught me to be. I turned to her, seeing not just the bride in her extravagant gown, but the little girl who used to fall asleep reading medical textbooks because she wanted to be just like her mom. You never have to apologize for trying to find your way, I said, pulling her into a hug. But remember, your value isn't in who you marry or what family you join. It's in what you do, how you treat people, and the difference you make in the world. Amy wiped away a tear, careful not to smudge her makeup. I know that now more than ever. She paused, then added with a small smile, Health Commissioner Carter. I laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why not? After today, I'd say anything is possible. As we stood there, mother and daughter, looking out at the city together, I felt a deep sense of peace. The Tylers had tried to put me in my place, never realizing that I had built my own, a place of respect, dignity, and true accomplishment. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. The staff can't stop talking about yesterday. You've become a legend at the Grand Plaza. I smiled as I typed my reply. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living your truth and letting others learn from it. As I set my phone down, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Years of hard work, quiet dedication, and